Coming in at number 5, we have Shh, uploaded to Reddit by user Fuzzy Bandits. Love the name, big fan, 10 out of 10. They talk about the time they encountered something truly bizarre in their home. I quote, "When I was a teenager, I used to babysit my cousin Alyssa. She was little, maybe almost 2, maybe a little older, old enough to say sentences. I'm giving her a bath before bed when she looks out into the hallway and gets a terrified look on her face and starts crying. At this moment, my auntie's Pomeranian starts going nuts as well, barking and growling in the hallway. The atmosphere in the room became uncomfortable and I started getting scared. I took her downstairs from the 3rd floor in the townhouse to try and calm her down. I asked her what was wrong and she said something along the lines of, 'The man with the black eyes was there.' When I continued to pry, she looked up at the 2nd floor stairs, her eyes getting big, and looked at me, bringing her finger up to her mouth and saying, 'Shh,' or shaking her head no. No thank you, I hate every single part of this. If this happened to me, I'd be out there in a second. She can find her own babysitter. If she's old enough to talk, she's old enough to look after herself."
Number 4 on this list is the Green Kids. So this one could be an argument for a parallel universe or for aliens. I'll let you guys be the judge. BuzzFeed says, back in the 12th century, 2 children, a brother and sister, allegedly popped up in the village of Woolpit in Suffolk, England. Both had greenish colored skin, spoke an unknown language, wore bizarre clothing, and initially refused to eat any food other than raw beans. They were taken in, cared for, and eventually they adapted, developing a taste for food and losing the green hue in their skin. Shortly after, the boy became sick and died, but after learning to speak English, the girl explained that she and her brother were from a place where the sun didn't shine bright and it was perpetually twilight. She and her brother were there herding their dad's cattle when they heard some loud noise and were suddenly in a new place where they were eventually discovered in Woolpit. The girl grew up and integrated herself into her new surroundings, though it remained unknown how she and her brother got there. The girl went on to get married and live her life here in a dimension that might not have actually been her place of origin. So, what are we thinking here, guys? Alien? Or alternate universe? I mean, when I hear green skin and unknown language, I automatically think alien, but I mean, I guess that could all be another dimension as well. That might also explain why they would have been okay with just staying here too. Anyways, comment down below what team you guys are on, Team Alien or Team Alternate Universe. Number 3 on this list is Jofar Vorin. This is a man who ended up being shipwrecked in Germany, but originally came from a completely unknown land. BuzzFeed says, so this story goes, a peculiar guy popped up in a village where he was picked up and questioned by authorities. The only comprehensible language he spoke was a broken variation of German, but he said his name was Jofar Vorin and claimed to come from a part of the world known as Sakria. He conveyed that he was searching for his long-lost brother, whom he'd been separated from during a shipwreck. While he had geographical information regarding his home planet, such as 5 compartments known as Sakria, Aflar, Aslar, Oslar, and Uplar, he couldn't trace his route on shore, and he would wind up living in Berlin, where he was a topic of discussion amongst the scientific and simply curious communities. This one seems like one of those stories where you get sucked into a whirlpool or something and then come out the other side in a totally different universe. I guess that's what happened here with Jofar. I must admit that I kind of feel bad for him if all this is true, because if all of this is true, then not only did you get sucked into another universe and are now forced to live here, but I don't think that you're ever gonna find your brother, bro. Stories like this should make you just a little bit more aware on that next fishing trip, I think. Number 2 on this list is the wrong turn. Imagine taking a wrong turn and ending up in an entirely different universe. That may have been what happened in this next story. BuzzFeed says the ladies had been driving on black asphalt in the desert, but after taking a wrong turn, they said they found themselves driving on white cement surrounded by grain field and a lake. They spotted a building with a large neon sign making up illegible random squiggles, and as they pulled in for assistance, a large group of tall men poured out of the front door, seeming shocked and upset, waving their arms at the girls. Then the girls realized these tall men didn't even appear to be human, so they freaked out and drove off. While the girls were driving away, they noticed 4 peculiar egg-shaped automobiles mounted on tricycle-style wheels, and they were following them. They sped ahead until the mysterious vehicles were out of sight, and when they reached the canyon and drove all the way back through it, they'd somehow return to the desert they were originally in. Glad to be back, but unable to figure out the mysterious place that they just gone or how they arrived there. So how the heck did that all happen? Also, they didn't mention it in the story, but what desert and what canyon is this in? This is seriously dangerous if all of this is true. I don't want to be driving through a canyon late at night and then just appear in another universe. Especially not a universe that has a bunch of super tall alien dudes chasing me around in eggmobiles. The girls who went there swear what they claim is true, so just be aware if you're driving out late at night. And number 1 on this list is the band Breakup. The Beatles, one of the greatest bands to ever create music, literally ever. They were incredible, and the thought of them making any more music together is just so intriguing. Apparently, in another universe, they did just that. BuzzFeed says in 2009, a man named James Richards was in Livermore, California, driving home from Turlock with his dog. He claims that when he pulled over to let the pup empty her bladder, she sprinted after a rabbit and he followed after her, but tripped, knocking himself unconscious. When James came to, he was next to an odd machine in the company of a man named Jonas, who claimed to have found his unconscious body while on a work trip for an interdimensional travel agency. While they were together, Jonas and Richards wound up chatting about the pop culture in their respective universes and discovered that not only did the Beatles also exist in this dimension, but they were all still alive and actively making music. Richards acquired a cassette tape labeled Everyday Chemistry, which contained Beatles songs that never existed in our dimension. He even uploaded the songs to a website and called it the BeatlesNeverBrokeUp.com. So if there is a universe where there are more Beatles albums, then sign me up, dude. This also opens the door to so many cool universes out there as well. Like, there's definitely a universe out there where the only thing that's different is like Dunkaroos never got discontinued. And you know, let's face it, that's the universe that I think we all should want to live in.
Coming in at number 5, we've got SCP-5000. The entity itself isn't all that scary, but it has many stories to tell. So very many. See, SCP-5000 is a non-functional mechanical suit known as an absolute exclusion harness. It was designed by the SCP Foundation, but not this SCP Foundation. Somehow it made its way into our dimension, or whatever the dimension the folks writing the entry originated in, containing the corpse of Pietro Wilson. Pietro is a Foundation employee and also very much so alive in the case of the Foundation that's writing this entry. So what happened here? Through some sneaky research and observation of files within the suit, Foundation folks were able to piece together what happened, and the story is not a happy one. In fact, it's quite terrifying, especially if you consider that it happened in a dimension not unlike our own. The logs begin with other Pietro explaining that he's probably the only one left. What does that mean? How did he escape with one of these crazy suits? Well, soon we learn exactly what's going on. The SCP Foundation has decided to exterminate the human race. Their objective has switched from secure, contain, protect to annihilate all humans. Immediately after making their once secret presence known, they went on the offensive, using all the anomalies at their disposal to make this task a little easier. And Pietro is essentially a wayward wanderer, bearing witness to all this madness. As he makes his way through the rapidly disintegrating world, his absolute exclusion harness makes it so that nobody will see him. The suit makes it impossible for any outside influence to observe him or the device. Super helpful when you're in a world being dominated by a ruthless organization, filled to the brim with deadly monsters. Like, get this. Pietro writes down all the different tales of the Foundation letting loose anomalies on the general public. They widely distribute photographs of 096 and then let it run free. They detonate nukes on 196's back, causing it to stir, which results in massive earthquakes and tsunamis. Mr. Deeds, the magic butler, is called upon to assassinate all sorts of folks. The flesh that hates is spread about in major city centers, and 682 is just straight up released. Not good. Just about every horrific thing they worked so hard to avoid is now just happening at large, all with the ultimate goal of wiping humans off the face of the earth. And Pietro, our faithful narrator, is just wandering the wastes, unable to be perceived, but seeing it all happen in real time. If that's not the scariest possible SCP story, then we might have reached a point where it could actually happen.
Coming in at number 4, we have Unwanted Tenants. Posted to Reddit by user Vanilla Gorilla, they tell of an awful time they spent in a potentially haunted home. I quote, "My daughter was 4 years old when we lived in our last home. I was a single mum at the time, so it was just she and I alone in the home. I always got an uncomfortable feeling in her room, particularly in the closet area, but never thought much of it. Until one evening, I had to put her to bed, and as I was doing chores, I walked by her room and heard her whispering. I listened for a bit, thinking she was talking to herself, but it was definitely a two-way conversation with her saying, okay, and stuff like that. I walked in and asked her who she was talking to. She smiled uncomfortably and said, no one. I took her out into the hall and she wouldn't say anything, but I could tell she was afraid. Finally, we went outside of the house. She said there was a man in her room who didn't want us in the house, and he had told her this and to tell her mum to leave. Moved us out a month later. She has not since ever had an episode like this. Honestly, this reminds me of something straight out of the Amityville Horror, The Others, or even The Conjuring 2 with the old man in his chair. If a spirit wants you out the house, I highly suggest you just get out of the house while you can. Don't f with the dead. Coming in at number 3, the Doppelganger. Posted to Reddit by Quiet Voice 4846, they discuss the time they saw something very peculiar in the mirror. I quote, "Late at night I usually go to the bathroom multiple times, but for the past 4 days, every time I go to leave, I can see myself standing in the mirror from the corner of my eye. It is like the other me is watching me leave the bathroom. It terrifies me to the point where I almost run out without looking directly at the mirror. I never told my husband about it because I didn't want to acknowledge it out loud. Earlier today I took a nap in our bed while he sat in the chair next to it watching TV. When I woke up he told me that he had seen me sit up and crawl backward to the edge of the bed and stand in front of our bedroom door from the corner of his eye. He thought it was weird that I got up like that because I'm in my last month of my pregnancy and I can't really move so good without it hurting, so he tried talking to me. When I didn't answer, he looked at the door to find me not there and still sleeping in bed. I got really creeped out and I finally told him about what I had been seeing in the bathroom. He thought it was creepy as well, but didn't really want to talk about it anymore because he thinks it will give whatever it is power or energy. I have no idea what it wants or why we both saw it. Honestly, if I were them, I would leave that house and never look back. Or she's having a demon baby. That as well. I think it's a demon baby. Coming in at number 2, Haunted Hotels. Posted to Reddit by Bright_eyes10, they state, when I was 15 I travelled to Europe with my family. We stayed in Etzel, Germany in a small inn for a few nights. My parents had a double bed on the second floor, my sisters had the double bedroom next to theirs, and I was lucky enough to have a single room, all to myself at the far end of the hall. When we went to check into our rooms, as soon as I entered the hallway our rooms were in, I remember almost feeling as though I walked into a wall of bad energy. I just felt so unnerved and uneasy in that hallway, but I passed it off as an overactive imagination. I slept the first night without any issues other than waking up a few times. The next morning at breakfast, one of my sisters mentioned feeling really uncomfortable in the hallway, almost as if the air was crushing her. It unnerved me even more that I wasn't the only one who felt weirded out. Plus she was an adult at the time, so it further cemented in my head that the wing of the hotel was odd. Later that night I'm sleeping peacefully when at about 2 AM I'm woken by something ripping the covers off of me and being jerked about 2 feet towards the end of my bed by my ankle. At first I thought someone had broken into my room because when I turned towards what had grabbed me, a huge looming black shape was visible in the darkness, like a man was in my room. I frantically flipped the lights on only to have there be nothing there. The window was locked from the inside, there was no one in the closet or the bathroom, and my room was also still locked from the inside. I stayed up the rest of the night scared. The user goes on to state that the next morning she tells her sister about what happened, but what she doesn't expect is that her sister also saw the same silhouetted figure standing in the corner of the room. Absolutely terrifying. No thank you. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Purgatory Road. Posted to Reddit by an unknown user, they tell of the time they took a road trip from New York City to Rhode Island back in August of 2018. I quote, "None of us had been to Rhode Island before, so we were excited about the drive, especially because we had rented a Mustang convertible for it. We left a little later than expected. It was about 10:30 PM, and since it was a busy Friday night, we decided to punch our destination into the Waze traffic app to beat the traffic." Love the subtle Waze promo there. Respect. Anyway, they continue by saying, eventually we started losing steam, so my friend in the backseat fell asleep and I just kept driving along quietly, when my friend in the passenger seat told me to exit the freeway to take a side road. At first, driving on the unlit winding back roads was relaxing, but then the wind picked up and it got increasingly foggy and misty. I wasn't scared per se, just a little on edge. I thought about pulling over to put the top up but decided against it since there were no cars in sight. Heavy rain was projected for the entire weekend, so I wanted to get the most out of the convertible, so I kept going along as normal, if not a little too fast to get back to the main roads as quickly as possible when something just shifted. I don't know how to explain it other than an unsettling exposed feeling. I remember pulling my sweater over my legs to cover up. Then my friend up front told me to look at the street sign in the distance. It read, Purgatory. Seconds later we went around a bend where a large red cross was installed. Then around the next bend, a big truck came hurtling down the one-lane road aimed straight at us. The user goes on to state that they swerved to the side, narrowly avoiding getting crushed by the truck. They all felt disturbed and unsettled about what had happened. However, the user decided to look up the road, which was revealed to be situated next to an old graveyard. They also discovered that 2 teen girls had died there in August of 2011 in an accident on their way to visit the grave of Rhode Island's infamous vampire Mercy Brown, who died in 1892. Apparently they decided to go down the dark windy road because they thought it looked haunted. Turns out it may very well be.
Number 5 on this list is Torrid. A pretty clear indicator that someone is from an alternate dimension or parallel universe is if they claim to be from somewhere that doesn't exist. That's pretty much what happened a few years ago with a man in Japan. BuzzFeed says, allegedly this man told customs he was in Japan for business and had legitimate visa stamps, currency from multiple European countries, checks from an unknown bank, and a driver's license issued in Torrid. He was sent to a hotel while things were sorted out, while 2 immigration officers stood outside of his hotel door. But when they went to check on him in the morning, he'd vanished. This was from 15 stories up above a busy street, so escaping through a window is very unlikely, if not impossible. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department searched but never located the man from Torrid. So many questions arise from a story like this. Where is Torrid? What did he need to do in Japan? Where did he go while he was being watched in the hotel, and how did he get out of there? Now that this guy disappeared, no one is gonna know the answer. I think the thing that I don't understand is if this guy wanted to keep his country secret, like he wanted to make sure that no one found out about it, then why did he show up to the airport with documents from that country? Like if he was traveling from another universe, he has to know that wouldn't have worked. And one has to imagine that he didn't want us to know his true identity because then he disappeared without telling anyone anything the next day. It all just seems super fishy and doesn't really add up. Unless he just screwed up super bad and picked up the wrong papers in the morning when he was traveling dimensions and coming to Japan. Oh, and okay, also another question. If he can move through dimensions and come into our universe and stuff, like why couldn't he have just warped into Japan? Like why did he need to use the airport? You'd think that air travel would be pretty archaic and unnecessary for a guy who just moved from, one universe to another one. Comment down below if you can think of any logical reasons as to why all of these things may have been the way that they were. I'm curious to hear what you guys can come up with.
Coming in at number 4, we've got the end of death. There's a strange fixation on death throughout the SCP Wiki. I suppose humans exist to prolong their own lives and prevent our species from ever dying out. The ultimate fear in the back of people's minds is their own death and the inability to stop it, mostly anyways. So it makes sense that there are so many different SCPs directly linked to death. One extra secret SCP details the discovery that after dying we still retain some semblance of consciousness, forced to feel our bodies decompose in the darkness long after we're buried. Another one looks at how the linear progressive passage of time is actually an anomaly and has caused billions of deaths. No stopping that. But what if death didn't happen? Or rather, couldn't? Welcome to the End of Death Hub. This is a whole separate canon within the SCP Wiki. Plenty of contributors have added to this particular horror story, one in which the entire observable world ceases to experience the effects of death. Immortality is forced upon all life without any other biological change. At first, this doesn't sound so bad, right? Death is scary. We don't want our loved ones to die. We don't want to die ourselves. The other side of that river Styx is unknown and therefore horrifying. So eternal life would be pretty sweet, no? Well, actually, it would be a total nightmare. Death is essential for life to continue. It's natural, it's needed. Without death, many things would be unable to change, unable to grow, and more. Overpopulation quickly becomes a major issue in this sprawling story as organizations and individuals alike seek out ways to keep the growth of everything under control. Also keep in mind that free from death does not mean free from pain and suffering. If you run out of food or experience major bodily trauma, you won't die and just be free from that suffering. Instead, you'll feel it more intensely than previously thought possible. And for longer too. That starvation feeling will never disappear. Those fatal injuries will plague you. Not fun. So if you really want a truly scary SCP story, check out the End of Death Hub. Pick through a few entries and see how awful life without death could truly be. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-4000. Listen carefully to this story, because if you mess any of the rules up, you could find yourself in a world of hurt. SCP-4000 is a very strange case. It's a forested land only accessible through weird ritual. Those who do complete the tasks required to travel here show up in a well and must walk down a path until they loop back to the start. During these walks, they will encounter all sorts of anomalous creatures. The creatures that live here come in all shapes and sizes and often undergo horrible mutations. Unfortunately, they're not huge fans of being mutated and can get pretty upset about it. Here's where the rules start to kick in. Do not call anything by a consistent name. Don't answer to a consistent name. Accept any gifts presented to you, but don't use or consume them. And if a ghost tells you that it's not a creature, listen to what it says. Follow these to a T and you might just make it out unscathed. But if you goof up and call something a consistent name, you might end up experiencing some really strange stuff. Creatures from SCP-4000 could appear to you in the real world as terrible hallucinations, or maybe not as hallucinations. Yikes. See, names are powerful things. They anchor a person or thing to their identity. But if we're to believe the stories of SCP-4000, the inhabitants of this world are Fae, banished here without any names or titles. If you give one of these things your name, they might just take it, and from there it can only go downhill. You could find yourself mutating, shifting, or changing without knowledge of why, just like a certain scholar, but we won't talk too much about him here. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-1782. At first, this anomaly appears to be an abandoned apartment in Kiev that is constantly changing. Every few days, it instantaneously changes its appearance and contents. Often these things can be quite gross, quite macabre. One famous instance of this is when it was found to be full of birds and there was an old man inside feeding himself to them. The manifestations found in the apartment often point towards the toilet in the back. Further investigation shows that there's some weird stuff consistently back there. An odd dude with a TV camera showed some Foundation staff that there was a horrific cross between a human skeleton and a septic tank hidden back there. Even stranger, a fetus would appear in the toilet from time to time. It has been said that this fetus would have been a reality bender, but its mother didn't carry it to term. This angered it, and it now changes the observable reality within the apartment. However, it does so with a partially developed brain, leading to unexpected and often incomprehensible results. Nobody's been inside the apartment since, with the Foundation preferring to explore it using drones. Even then, the tales people tell of this apartment are so hard to parse, who knows what's really going on in there. And finally, at number 1, we've got SCP-5999. This is an absolute gem of a story. In fact, there are many stories threaded throughout. There's the story of the cursed video game, Prodigy Priest King, which sends all who play it into an obsessive quasi-religious furor. Nobody survives playing the game, although the results are always a little different. There are the anomalous remains of a Miss Jacqueline Holcroft that seem to haunt all those who encounter them through auditory and visual hallucinations. Those who read far enough might find loose teeth in their drawers or corpses in places they shouldn't be. There's a town in Kansas chock full of ghastly apparitions and MTF-destroying ghouls. People fall through the earth and later reappear to torment their kin. So many things happen throughout the many 5999 entries, all hidden behind major security clearance barriers, but if you make it through, blowing out the candles one by one, you might find that the chains are weakening. This means you're closer to the whole story, but also much closer to danger. Do you dare read the whole thing, or will you just take my word that it's scary and live your life without that? Some chilling stories for these chilly nights. What could be better, right? Well, the way some of these tales end, I'm sure you'd rather they didn't exist in the first place, but hey.